Behold the beautiful new Gideon Guardian LPVO. The only problem with this optic is that it uses a 34mm main tube, so it can be really hard to find a decent mount that's not too expensive for a 34mm main tube optic. Oh wait, I lied. There's one, we made it. So this is the Gideon mount that is super affordable and goes right up to the Gideon Guardian LPVO, and I'm going to show you how to do it in this video. First thing I've done is I have backed out these screws on my 1913 military standard Picatinny rail mount. I'm going to put some blue thread locker on them. Putting blue thread locker here underneath is not going to do it for me, because even when this is tightened up all the way, then the back part of these threads is not going to engage in the part that actually matters. So what I'm going to wind up with is I'm going to have blue thread locker there and none where it needs to go. So I've backed this out far enough that it'll go on the Picatinny rail, and now there's little gaps here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put blue thread locker inside like this. So the blue thread locker is inside the female threads of my mount instead of being on the bolt itself. Okay, so what I've got here is my race gun AR. That's a home built gun, and it's just sitting on a standard aluminum magazine that's old and beat up, and it's in my vise, right? So all I need is a way to hold my AR up. They sell all kinds of fancy clamps and fixtures and stuff. I just stick a mag in a vise with some soft jaws, and voila, I've got my rifle on my vise. If I want to take it off, I just hit the mag release. Oh, look at that. I can take it off. I can drop it back on. You're going to find out that I do things the practical way. I don't like to buy a lot of gizmos if I can help it. Alright, so this is a forward offset mount. Why is it a forward offset mount? Because if it went straight up and down from the Picatinny mounting surface of the receiver, we wouldn't have enough room for our eye relief that we want when we actually look through the scope. So we're going to take full advantage of the fact that this is a forward offset cantilever type mount, and we're going to put it pretty much all the way at the front like that. And what we're going to do is I have a Wheeler fat wrench. This is the electronic one. You can actually hear it. They also have a mechanical one. There's also a tool that comes in the box if you don't want to invest in all that. And I'm just going to tighten this up as best I can. Now I've backed these out quite a bit for the blue thread locker, so it's going to take quite a few rotations to get it snug. If you want to be proper about it, you wouldn't do this part with the torque wrench, because I'm actually calculating torque this whole time while I'm doing it. I'm kind of wearing out my wrench, but whatever. These are not that expensive. Okay, I have this snug now, and what I've done is, while I was tightening that down, I was pushing this forward, because what we're mostly concerned with is recoil forces going backwards, and so I want the lugs to be in contact. If there's a little wiggle room here, I want it to be in contact that direction. So I pushed forward on the mount just with my thumb while I tightened that up until it was snug. Now it's time to actually torque these. This is a T25, so if you want to go with bits instead of using the wrench that's in the box, it's a T25, not an Allen, but a Torx or a Star, depending on what you call it. And let's just torque these to 20 inch-pounds. 20 inch-pounds, no more. That's close there. Getting close there. I'm going to go back to the front one. Alright, getting close again. Alright. Get close again. Alright, did you hear the solid beep? That means I reached my peak torque of 20 inch-pounds that I set in here. Alright, that's it. Did you notice that my hand was shaking to put that much torque? It doesn't mean that I'm weak. I'm not like a sissy boy here. 20 inch-pounds is plenty to put one of these mounts on an AR and not have it go anywhere, blue thread locker is your friend. I know there are other mounts out there that you can torque it to 60 inch-pounds, and if you want to do that and have a giant torque wrench like this, you're welcome to spend the extra money on those. Personally, I don't think that's super necessary, because at 20 inch-pounds with blue thread locker, I've had all kinds of things go wrong with mounts. Them coming loose and falling off the rail is not one of those things. 20 inch-pounds with blue thread locker is enough to get the job done there. Now what we need to do is wait 12 hours for this to set. No, I'm just kidding. Wouldn't that be terrible? That would be so bad. What we're going to do is go and we're going to take the top caps off with our T10. This is our T10 wrench. And we're going to take the top caps off one screw at a time. I'll skip making you watch all that part. Okay, I've got the top caps off, and now it's time to place the Guardian in its little cradle that I've created. Alright, and what I'm going to do is, the tube dimension is the same all the way from the middle part to the ends. So anywhere in here, this is basically your range of play, right? But this being 2024, and for me, I don't have an assault weapons ban where I live in Texas. I also get an adjustable stock, so I don't have this exactly perfect. I can make a stock adjustment that might help me out. But what I like to do is I like to take the stock and put it in my favorite position for length of pull first. So my stock is kind of fixed, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip up these flip caps and I'm going to get behind the rifle and act as if I'm looking through the scope. I don't know if I'm even in the frame right now, but I'm looking through the scope with the buttstock on my shoulder as if I was taking a shot, and I need to move this back and forth until I see a perfect, flawless sight picture. For me, that's actually a little bit further forward than I expected it to be. Alright, so for me, I'm going to scoot this optic as far forward as I can, because this thing has a ton of eye relief. So not only is the mount as far forward as it can be, but the optic is going to be as far forward as it's going to be. That's just for me and my eyes. That matches up with what I've seen in the past from LPVOs. I generally like to have the ocular lens just above the charging handle right here, okay? So I've seen other guys mount LPVOs and they mount them way back here like this, and the name of the optic and the magnification ring is what's over the charging handle, and then they have a hard time looking through it. Now, I don't like this scope, the glass isn't very good. Well, you didn't position it super well for the correct eye relief. So I know where I'm going to put my optic. It can kind of sit in there loosey-goosey for a second, and I'm going to get my first top cap. I'm actually going to close these back up. The flip caps are kind of acting as protective covers here, because the chances of this getting dropped, my fingers getting all over it, something touching the glass is extremely high right now. So let's go ahead and cover that up, right? Here are my two top caps. They are both identical, they're interchangeable, and they are not dependent on orientation. I can move them any way that I want to. It's not going to matter, they're going to fit. I'm going to put them up top like this. I'm going to take my T10 wrench that came in the box, or for me, I like to use these bits. I buy these suckers on Amazon in bulk because I break a lot of these. You probably don't need to do that, but for my job, I like to have lots of T10 and T15 bits on hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these screws one at a time so I don't drop them. No reason to get too ambitious here. And I'm just going to get them started. Alright? Just like that. I'm not torquing anything down. I'm just getting them started. I don't need to do blue thread locker on these because they come with thread locker on them already from the factory in the box. You're welcome very much. Alright, that's the back one done, and I'll see you in a minute when I have the front one done too. Okay, I've got both the rear cap on and the front cap on, and I've tightened down the front cap a little bit more so the optic will hold still for a second, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top outer turret off. I have here a quarter, and I'm going to put it in that slot. Oh, it was tight from the factory. Goodness, they want that to stay put. There we go. We're going to go lefty-loosey. Pulling up a little bit until that comes right off. Alright, that's the outer turret. Don't lose that. You're going to want that later. This is the inner turret. There's a waterproofing O-ring. There's a spline here. This part here is what actually turns to make your elevation adjustments. But what we want out of this is the flat section here. This flat section of this inner turret should theoretically be pretty well in tune with the orientation of the reticle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bubble level on it. Yeah, that works. Okay, the bubble level is to the left. And I have another bubble level here. Again, this is Wheeler. I'd like to thank my sponsor, Wheeler Engineering. Of course, they don't actually sponsor me. Let's see if there's a way I can show you this. I buy their tools with my own money. Alright. Might have to take a photo of this to show you. The bubble level that I have on my receiver rail is showing the bubble in the middle of its travel, meaning that the receiver rail is nice and level left to right. I already know my front to back with this optic. What I need to do is set my level front to back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually loosen this top cap that I tightened up earlier. You're going to fall off when I do that. Okay. Now this has play in it, right? So I have my front and rear figured out. I'm going to go as much to the front as I can without actually getting stuck. I want it to clamp fully on the 34mm tube, so I left a little bit of a gap. There's a little gap right there, okay? Didn't push it all the way up. I'm just going to pull it just a hair off because I don't want any dimensional issues. But I can move this optic. I'm going to put you there, Mr. Bubble Level. And I'm going to rotate this until the bubble levels match up very, very closely. This one's actually a hair to the right, so I'm going to make this one a hair to the right. Alright, stand by. I'm going to take a nice photo of that so I can show you real quick. Okay, if you're waiting for this to get hard, here's the part where it gets difficult. Now what we need to do is tighten down these T10s on the mount without disturbing our bubble levels and without turning the optic. That's the hard part. So I'm going to snug these down a little bit at a time in a crisscross pattern. Once again, I've mounted my T10 onto my Wheeler fat wrench. I'm going to snug it down pretty well. Okay. I think we're doing all right. Okay. Alright, I've screwed up. Here's how I've screwed up. On the left side of these rings, you see no gap there at all. But on the right side, off of the camera, I can feel and see there's a gap over here. That's not what we want. No bueno. So what I need to do is I need to loosen this side by maybe half a turn. Alright, with this side already clamped. Then I'm going to tighten this side by half a turn. Yep, and it's going to bring this over just a little bit. Alright, what I'm looking for is a little gap here on both sides. A little gap here on the left and a little gap here on the right. Alright, that means that's much better for even clamping, because what I don't want is to have this to be completely tight and as tight as it can possibly be, and then have a looseness torque issue over here on the right hand side. You want equal and even pressure on both sides, and that's only achievable if you have a gap on both sides. Very important. Check for that. Alright, if you didn't get it right the first time, there's nothing wrong with backing off your screws and trying again. Okay? We got all the time in the world to do this. I'm going to do the same thing with the front now. We're going to loosen you up, Mr. Front, just a little bit. Alright, and then as I tighten down, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera. No, I need a little bit more. A little gap should appear there. Yep, there it is. You're going to have to trust me. You're not going to be able to see this on camera with the angle, with the lens that I have. We're talking about a very, very fine gap, but it's there. I'm talking like you wouldn't be able to slip a credit card into there. All right, you're gonna you could use a feeler gauge if you were super type A about it, but you'll be able to see it with your eyeballs. You want a gap on both sides. Now, while I'm doing all this, I need to make sure that this bubble level isn't changing its reading for me. All right, because with all this torquing and untorquing that I'm doing, I could very easily turn the entire Guardian in the mount and ruin the whole point of this. So far, I have not. So I'm checking that my bubble levels are still level this whole time. All right, that's looking a lot better. Now it's time to actually start torquing these down. I'm going to go in a zigzag pattern, and I'm just going to, I can't read this readout, which is why I like the electronic one, because I can't read it, but I can hear it. Beep, beep, beep. Beep, beep, beep. All right. The 3 beeps mean that I'm approaching my torque. A solid beep means that I've reached my torque. You guys get the idea? I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing. Okay, I've got these torqued down. All of these top cap screws are at about 15 inch-pounds. 10 to 15 inch-pounds is fine. You don't need any more than that. They already have thread locker on them. If you don't have an inch-pound torque wrench and you're just using the little L-shaped wrench that comes in the box with your optic, with your mount, just turn them until they don't want to turn anymore. Be careful about it. Don't put crazy monkey strength on it, okay? There's no reason to torque the snot out of this. These are good screws. You will probably break the tool before you get them all tightened down if you put too much torque on it. The other thing that you can do is actually crush the scope tube in this mount, which will be covered under the warranty, but nobody's going to be happy about it, right? So there's no reason to go really, really crazy with the torque on this. My bubble level still indicated everything was flat the way that I want it to be. Now it's time to do a little bit of housekeeping. I have my outer turret here. I'm going to orient it to 0. It doesn't really matter because I'm going to have to reorient it when I zero this thing anyway. There we go. It popped into place. Sometimes, let me show you one more time here. This spline here is very, very fine, and it corresponds with a spline that's inside this top cap. And don't force it on. Don't try to, if it doesn't want to go on, and you're like, it won't, like, fine, I'm going to teach you. No, bad. Put the mallet away. Bad idea. What you just want to do is you just want to kind of reorient it a couple times, wiggle it around a little bit like this. All right, and eventually it will drop into place where you want it to. Just be patient and work with the spline. Yep, now it's actually fighting me. I got it the first time. There we go. See how it just sort of like clicked into place? I didn't force anything. I had to wiggle, 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 and eventually everything lined up pretty much correctly. That's what you're looking for. If you're forcing it, you're doing it wrong, all right? There's my little screw that goes into the top of that. My 1968 era quarter. It's going to tighten that down, not too much, because again, I'm going to pull this thing off when I re-zero this optic on this rifle anyway, right? So I'm not trying to lock this down. There's no point to that. That's in place. Now let's do our battery for the illumination. So my cap screwed off, counterclockwise, lefty-loosey. I buy these Duracell batteries in bulk from Amazon. You should too. Get them while the getting's good. The positive side of the battery is the flat side that says Duracell CR2032. It's got a little logo on there, and it says a plus. That's the positive side. I'm going to try to hold that in place and not drop it as I do this on video for you. And the tray goes on righty-tighty. Again, don't force it. Spin it gently until it starts to screw in place. There we go. No reason to over torque that. Kind of get that lined up the way that I like. And now I'm going to actually move. Let's open these up. I'm going to move my settings, and boom, I have red illumination in this particular Guardian. We will also eventually do green. So I know that my rheostat works, and I'm going to check that I do in fact have, yep, and that's off again. I have 11 brightness settings. This one goes to 11. Alright, I'm going to set you like that. Alright, and with that, I've got this cap on, I've got this cap on, I've got my flip caps on. Oh, one more thing. This little throw lever here. There's no good way to really torque it in place super hard. So guess what it's going to get? That's right, blue thread locker. Let's put a dab of blue thread locker on that bad boy. Just like that. Because I don't want that backing out. Screw you down into place. There we go. Wipe off the excess as always. Alright, we have ourselves an LPVO that's ready to go out to the range and get zeroed. Okay, so our scope is mounted and we think we have everything level and exactly the way we want it to be, but how can we test that? Well, you look for something that's vertical, straight up and down. But how do you know what's straight up and down? Maybe that painting on the wall isn't really straight up and down. Maybe that door frame isn't really straight up and down if you're living in an old house, right? So there's a method that I call the Plumb method, and the Egyptians actually used this to help them make the pyramids long ago, without the help of aliens, I might add. So I have a shoestring here that I've tied to my barbell on my squat rack, and I've tied a BCG to it. I just need a weight and a string, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a source of light, and I'm going to hit that source of light. Boom, hit it. And you'll notice it casts a shadow on the wall. This shadow is straight up and down because gravity is pulling my shoestring taut. It doesn't matter if nothing else in my house is straight up and down, that shadow is straight up and down. Now I can take my reticle, align it with that, and take my bubble levels and double check. I can even put the rifle up to my shoulder and shoot it, or act like I'm shooting it, dry fire, make sure your rifle is unloaded, but take a firing stance, a firing position, look through the eye relief, adjust my ocular the way I want, and all that good stuff as if I was getting ready to zero, and I can line it up with this shadow and tell if my reticle is up and down the way that I want it to be. Didn't cost me anything but a shoelace and a BCG from an AR that I already have in the vise right now, right? So that is the Plumb mob method. That's how I like to check vertical alignment on reticles. And with that, let's go to the range and zero this thing soon. We'll see you there.